Just give me a 1 second. All right. Okay. Uh, Pronouns he, him, or you can refer to me as PM as well. Verbal POIs, I don't check the chat at all. And yeah, I'll start now. The unfortunate reality of a society in which bigger companies buy out smaller companies, disincentivize inventors, take away the credit that smaller companies so rightfully deserve is why we are never proud to propose. What does organic growth look like on our side, right? I think that organic growth is probably going to be a growth in which a company achieves by increasing output and expanding their customer base, right? This is to say that they are probably going to be developing new products individually. This is to say that the company would be considered as a independent entity, right? I think that this probably work with, like, for example, the government is likely going to incentivize these companies, encourage them to partake in organic growth over inorganic growth in order to develop the economy. And when these companies, for example, have a multi-million valuation, then they can partake in inorganic growth for the companies to innovate even more. I think in status quo in developed countries, they are probably going to be they're currently going to be, for example, exporting countries. This is to say that they are probably going to, for example, be exporting oil, gold, etc. They right, they're probably going to have good minerals and good oil slash raw resources. More on this in DPM's extension. Two paths to victory for proposition today. One, why is it that innovation is going to be better on our side? Why will companies invent better quality, futuristic items that can bring benefit or entertainment to a developing society? But two, why are startup companies likely going to grow more as a company in of itself? Why, which leads to more growth for the developing country as a whole? Why is it that is in the best interests of these developing countries to encourage companies to use organic growth to basically say that other companies should not buy them off until they become multi-million valuation companies? Why incentivization is going to work on our side? Because if government reinforces it, is likely going to be good, right? Since their primary goal as a developing country is to help the economy basically develop the country into, for example, maybe like a developed country, right? The objective of both teams in this debate is probably going to be to solve the problems that developing countries have and develop them, right? Why is it in the developing countries? Why is it that developing countries have? Why is it in the best interest to do this, right? Two arguments we want to prove. One being on opposition side, why is it that they will probably disincentivize innovation, right? I think that if people are likely going to get if companies are likely going to get bought out or there's no incentive to engage in organic growth, we tell you that the people that innovate get less credit, right? So there's probably going to be less incentive to innovate. If a company in China creates really exceptional quality phones, has high quality materials, has, like, for example, like really good, like, for example, phone glass, right? Has futuristic data on their side of the house, the company will probably be bought out by a bigger company like Huawei, right? If a company in US makes great computers, right, with perfect design, with perfect amounts of storage space, Apple's probably going to buy it and basically say, hey, I'm going to take your credit and say Apple create these computers or Huawei create these phones, right? Same for right. And in developing countries, like, for example, like a company that might like be like right next to like a perfect gold mine that might like mine a lot of gold, they're probably going to be bought out by like a bigger gold company, etc., right? The inventors as a collective is probably going to see that people are likely going to just, like, for example, buy the company that they work for out one way or the other, or just not get credit in general. It's likely that they'll basically just stop inventing because they aren't going to get the most out of the product anyways, right? So basically then this means that current inventors and maybe future inventors are likely to not want to invent due to this risk, right? But then the company that's been bought out probably can't continue to sell the products to, like, for example, a bigger company for them to promote and sell, because this just means that companies are going to start to, like, for example, stop being able to create more advancements, etc., for like the bigger companies that bought them out to sell, etc., right? So basically this just means less innovation in general on opposition's side of the house, right? If there's less want for inventors to actually invent, this them not being able to make a lot of money off an excellent product, since they're just going to get bought out. This is using actual incentives of an inventor, right? So in the best case of opposition sides of the house is that these inventors are likely to want to make that quick cash, right? But over time, this is unsustainable and likely to harm the people either way. What do we need from opposition? I think that we need analysis from them to tell you, Judge, why is it that they are able to make sure that inventors have an incentive to invent, but why is it that they are able to innovate faster? If not, they'll probably lose on this point later. On to our second argument on how there's probably going to be more long-term growth on the government side of the house, right? How does this work? I think that if these companies are set up for organic growth in developed country, they're likely going to have more long-term success. Two ways I think this works. One, logically, right? But two, solving the problems of corruption, right? Because in developing country, corruption is like very common. So if there's one big corporation that will right, then it's probably going to be like really easy to have it dominate the entire market, to have politicians working for it, right? Promoting lots of competition. It's better because you are able to like not just rely on one big powerhouse. I like for or monopoly, you put all of your eggs in one basket and risk everything in the basket, right? Which is bad for economics and development, right? But instead, you are able to have a growing economy that does have general competition organically, right? If you're able to promote organic growth, you are likely to have more competition, right? So in most cases, competition allows for, like, for example, more choices, especially in the developing world, because then it improves the quality of products through the efficient use of resources and enhances economic growth through increased investments. I'll take POI if there are any.
POI? How exactly
Yes.
would innovation happen on your side of the house if developing countries don't have the resources to be innovative?
Okay, this was literally just like our entire argument, right? We literally told you that innovation is probably going to happen because we literally have the feasibility to say that, hey, these companies already exist, right? These companies exist, so right? We tell you that this debate wouldn't exist if like the government literally has no company to, like, for example, like incentivize, right? Same on your side, you probably wouldn't have any companies to incentivize to use inorganic growth as well, right? So we don't really see how this POI is even going to work, right? I think that if you are able to promote, right? So I'm just going to quickly do a comparison, right? I think that proposition has a world where these startup companies are eaten up by other massive companies like Google, Amazon, and Meta, because these big corporations are able to have more innovation to grow even more, right? This is why we have told you in the model that these companies are allowed to have inorganic growth when they reach a multi-million valuation. This is why I'm never proud to propose.
All right, I'd like to thank that speaker for their speech. In order to continue the case for side opposition, I'd like to invite the first opposition speaker. Here.
Can I confirm that I'm both audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, the Wi-Fi here is kind of sketchy, so I don't know if I'll be able to stay on for the whole time, but anyways, okay. I will begin in 3, 2, 1. So far in today's debate, proposition agrees that the goal of today's debate is to prove which side can help the economic situation of a developing country more and help companies expand their businesses, of course. And although they've mentioned and tried to talk about like all the harms or supposed harms of inorganic growth, they haven't actually proven anything regarding organic growth. But I would like to first start off with a few rebuttals as to what they've said. So firstly, they say that we take away individuality of smaller companies. However, the individuality of small companies don't even like play a big role, or like even like in the success of a company in a developing country, right? Please note the entire characteristic of a developing country. I'll explain later. But like, sure, smaller companies can be individual, but without like profit or reputation or resources that they would share through inorganic growth, then the individuality wouldn't even matter anyways. So and number two, they also talk about monopoly and corruption. However, that is not actually our burden to prove. There are regulations that the government can place on companies in these situations to avoid monopoly in the long term. And this falls outside the scope of this debate. Now, my second speaker will be expanding more about the point about disincentivizing innovation, but essentially, we don't understand how when companies share resources and manpower, suddenly there's no innovation left, right? Because they have more workers and more skills, and overall, I'll prove to you why there can actually be more innovation, or at least profit and benefit for these people in the developing countries. So I would like to start off with our first argument about how with inorganic growth on our side, it allows companies to expand their businesses in a way otherwise not possible. So I'd like to characterize, first of all, what developing countries look like, right? In developing countries, people need jobs the most, and they need them fast, right? They've been struggling for like decades, and they lack they lack a stable economy, a stable market, and like a big enough market to even grow, to even have businesses grow. They don't have enough resources as individual companies because they don't start off with enough like profit or whatever, and they especially don't have stable primary industries with no infrastructure, and therefore not like enough jobs for the citizens. So I'd like to talk about what organic growth looks like in these developing countries. So essentially, you're able to like focus your own vision in organic growth, sure, but you can't really do that or create new products in developing countries when you lack the resources or the credibility or reputation to make your products, right? Like they will get to a point where they don't have enough resources to really push the company towards the direction that they want it to be. And these companies probably already tried organic growth and have tried to expand their businesses, but due to reasons such as the market not being big enough, or not having enough like assets, or the market not having enough like customers essentially for these types of products, it becomes unsuccessful. And especially in developing countries, these companies have even fewer resources to develop their country and or incentivize things such as foreign investment on their own, right? However, with inorganic growth, what it looks like is inorganic growth would happen locally and in the future from foreign investments. So essentially locally, these companies they would share their they would like invite these local workers and essentially train them, or like after buying the companies, they would share assets and share their market share and use their collective resources to further build their company using like maybe both of their visions as well. And this doesn't happen with organic growth, obviously, because they don't get to share these assets, and each company individually is smaller and like it can't build itself up, right? And the merged companies get to enjoy benefits such as additional skills and expertise from the new staff, and it increases the possibility of like obtaining capital. And when this new staff becomes more skilled and collectively they have a bigger reputation, what happens is foreign investment can come and is more incentivized because they see that, oh, there are more skilled workers in this area, or this company is worth investing in. So therefore they would share their resources. These foreign companies, maybe from developed nations, would come over to these local companies and like share them with even more resources, and for example, highly advanced technology. And these companies would gain this new technology, and therefore it would create more jobs, because like obviously the company gets bigger and bigger, and like they have the capacity to train more workers and build the company even bigger. And this is essentially a big part of today's debate, is that inorganic growth is faster than organic growth, because like in developing countries, people are like starving. They're searching for jobs all the time, but since the economy is crumbling and they don't have very credible companies that they could enter or get trained to enter, like the people struggle, right? However, when you have more resources and the products being produced and there are more products being produced because they have more manpower, therefore the company grows bigger and a lot faster. And it's faster for them to gain credibility, profit, and therefore their international presence, right? Because sure, you can have like individual small companies in developing nations, but they don't have much of a reputation in the global market. So there's a very little chance that internationally they would be able to make profit in those areas. But there's a much likelier chance when the companies collectively are bigger and share their resources and have a bigger reputation overall. And number two, our second argument, I'll talk briefly, is how it leads to more knowledge and experience with the locals, right? So basically, organic growth, it requires certain conditions to happen well, right? A good system, excellent talents, and a stable market. However, these are not available in developing countries. So it is unlikely that a developing country needs to make breakthroughs and achieve development, like organic growth simply won't happen. And developing countries do not have good legal systems, financial support, financial markets, or business culture, and these of which organic growth would also need. For example, the development of many countries such as South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore, it depends on the external market for the development of exports, right? But only when they have these external factors outside are they able to do organic growth on themselves. And we believe that on our side, once we have a stable enough economy through achieving inorganic growth, then organic growth can happen in many other ways. And this is more beneficial towards the entire economy and society as a whole. So overall, it's very evident that opposition takes today's debate.
I would like to thank that speaker for the speech. In order to continue the case for side proposition, I'd like to invite the second proposition speaker. Here.
Hello, am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. I prefer POIs to be verbal. And so without further ado, my time will start in 3, 2, 1. The moment a proposition comes up and says how these companies have to share their assets to be able to grow in like these developing countries, right? How these companies aren't going to have enough resources to be able to build their company. This is the moment where we think that proposition should take today's debate. A few responses to this. First of all, when they say that these people and these companies don't exist yet, and these people need like a lot of resources to expand, right? We tell you that we have the feasibility to tell you that these companies already exist, right? But they're not going to be like Amazon or Apple, right? Like these big like companies where they are super monopolies or something like that, right? We tell you these companies are probably going to be like small baby companies where they're probably not going to be known around in the world a lot, right? We tell you that these companies, we have the feasibility to say that these companies already exist, right? Furthermore, they talk about how these people, right, and how these people are not going to be able to have all of these like money to like expand, right? But we tell you that these companies, right, and these places, and especially in these developing countries, right, and the geography in these companies, right, we tell you these probably going to be places like the Middle East, right, and places in Africa as a whole, right, which means that these places will also have all the raw resources and oil. I'll get to that on my extension later. Okay, for a few things I'll do my speech. First of all, I like to give the finals refutations and on the rebuilding, and finally onto the extension. First of all, more refutations. First of all, on the first argument, right, it allows companies to expand their business, right? First of all, it comes at a risk because you're removing businesses, right? But how these companies are going to get bought up by these other bigger companies, right? How like Apple is probably going to buy up like Banana or Carrot or something like that, right? We tell you, and second of all, we tell you that because you're allowing these companies to buy up other companies, right, it creates more corruption as a whole, right? How these people are going to get like a lot of money, right? And how there's going to be probably some brain drain that's going to happen on their side of the house, right? Third of all, we tell you that this debate isn't about like sharing assets like that, right? No, thank you. It's about creating and innovating, right? Even if we take the case about how, we need to share these assets, right? We still tell you, right? But after they share their assets, right, that means that they're also going to be able to do organic growth, right? So organic growth is going to be is what they're going to have to do as a whole, right? Okay, now onto the second argument about more experience, right? First of all, we tell you it's non-unique, right? Since we also can get that being a business, right? Second of all, they tell you that, how this experience is unattainable, right, in these developing countries, right? But even if this is true, right, even if we take this argument that there's no possible way that their point is how skilled people are, right, how skilled people are able to work for larger companies can exist, right? But third of all, they allude that these developing countries have like bad management, right? First of all, on point A, first of all, how is this different on their side, and how do they possibly change this, right? They don't, right? First of all, and however, we give you an argument about how these developing countries are able to have these long-term growth, right? Which therefore we are able to change this, right? On B, even if this exists on our side of the house, right, it is worse on their side, right? Because they're adding corruption to unstable management, right, which is just way worse, right? A major flaw in their case is what is the difference between this and like Nigeria Shell, right? Because Shell is a really big company in Nigeria due to them buying out every single company, and eventually Nigeria is going to fall, right? Because Shell is going to be the major economic holder of Nigeria, right? But Nigeria is now under the corruption because of Shell, right? Therefore, that means all their analytics cannot be good due to this resulting in Shell, right? And Shell being like the major controller of the entire country. Yes, POI.
You understand that like big companies buying out smaller companies doesn't necessarily mean that these smaller company names are going to be completely wiped out. For example, Facebook buying WhatsApp.
Okay, first of all, we tell you, right? For example, if we already gave the example already from like Prime Minister's speech, right? We told you if there's a company called like Banana who gives like a lot of like good devices, right? Good quality phones, it's probably gonna be bought up by Apple, right? There's probably not gonna say, oh, we create a Banana created this, and then we're Apple, and then we're gonna create like more stuff for them, right? They're probably gonna take it and say that, oh, Apple created it. We are the ones that are actually doing all of these innovations. That's why we're the best company ever, which means that other people will probably gonna go and say that, oh, we're gonna have like such a good company, right? And even if that's not like true, that's still bad, right? It's because since it's cheating as a whole, right? And it means that it's like, oh, it's really bad and it becomes more corruption and corruption as a whole, right? Okay. Continuing onto the rebuttals, right? First of all, they say how we tell you that how they take away individuality, right? They say these companies do nothing. We don't see how the companies do nothing, right? But moreover, innovation exists and companies are capable of being innovating. Therefore, that means that people are able to be more innovative and we can partake in organic growth, right? Second of all, on the corruption case, right? The refutation is that, oh, they say that governments have checks and balances, missing links exist, corruption falls out of the scope, right? So first of all, corruption does not fall out of the scope because developing countries have corruption, right? Second of all, government checks and balances are in the developed world, right? The developing world and governments will do anything, and sometimes the governments are the corrupt ones. Okay, now onto the extension about how there's going to be more export as a whole, right? So what's the premise of this argument? It means that these organic growth, right? It means you have more supply due to these smaller companies wanting to meet the supply demand, right? So what this means is that these developing countries are good at exporting, right? Due to them have often good materials as like oil and like a lot of raw resources, right? And we see these geographies such as like the Middle East, where there's like a lot of oil, and like Africa, where there's a lot of raw resources, right? This means that they're probably going to be very good at exporting materials, right? It's due to the fact that they have competition, right? It's likely for them to actually have a good supply / demand on stuff in general, right? I think that this means that due to the fact that there are better companies that are going to be more exports, right? To sum it up, right, as a whole, right? If they are organic companies and have organic growth, right, it means that there's going to be more companies that's going to go like, there's going to be more competition as a whole, right? Which means that people will probably go and see, oh, there's like a gold mine there, right? So probably going to buy some gold from that gold mine, right? That also means that there's probably going to be like more growth since they want to be really good, right? Which means there's going to be more exports, and the process repeats over and over again while these people and these companies are able to become multi-million-dollar companies, right? And we also can say that these companies are able to go like, oh, we also have the feasibility to say that, oh, when these companies have reach like a multi-million-dollar valuation, this is the moment where these people are able to actually do some inorganic growth, right? And so let's do some comparisons here, right? So what do we have on side proposition as a whole, right? We have a world where these smaller companies where that exists already. We tell you these companies are not going to be bought up by these Apple companies and these big massive like corporations, right? They're probably not going to be bought up, right? Even they're not going to get bought up. Second of all, there's going to be more information. There's going to be more long-term growth on these government sides of the house, where these companies and these developing countries are able to grow more. And we tell you that there's going to be more exports, and these developing countries are able to actually have more exports. They're able to have a better economy as a whole. And for these reasons, very proud to be on side proposition. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank that speaker for the speech. In order to continue the case for side opposition, I'd like to invite the second opposition speaker here.
Hurry up, guys. Sorry, guys. Okay. Anyways, after that, I'm really sorry. But yeah, can I confirm that I am audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. When proposition comes up to us and gives us all of these examples about like bananas and like Apple and stuff like that, they don't really understand the point of this debate. This debate is not about bigger companies buying out smaller companies, because would rather about like a smaller company in a developing country and how exactly whether or not they would go through organic growth or inorganic growth to be able to increase their market presence. In my speech today, I'm going to be rebutting all of the proposition's points, and then going on into extension about how you make these companies more appealing to foreign large companies and foreign investment in our world. So first, some rebuttals. Their main point is about how we are de-incentivizing innovation. The proposition then assumes that all of these mergers and acquisitions are all like extremely innovative. They tell us that because a company exists, there must be innovation within it. This is incredibly assertive from side proposition, which they haven't mechanized out, because just because a company exists doesn't mean that they have skilled workers. It doesn't mean that they have credibility or they have the innovation to be able to create products that can impact a larger customer whole. That's why we see in the status quo companies that often fail. For example, innovation doesn't happen at all on your side because these developing countries don't, and these companies in developing countries don't have the resources at all to be able to apply their innovation to a public ground. Innovation isn't a talent. It's something that happens when you have the necessary resources, such as enough skilled workers and credibility for people to trust your innovation and for you to then gain profit. For example, if you have an incredibly innovative product that doesn't reach the customer mass it deserves because you are a small company that doesn't have credibility or a reputation, we think that that's when you're stifling innovation, or when you de-incentivize it. When aspiring entrepreneurs see that their innovation doesn't happen because they're smaller companies, that even if you are able to create that product, there's no profit that can be gained. They're more likely to give up on their innovation and not pursue this dream or create a company at all. So why then are you not going to lose innovation of smaller companies on our side? This innovation doesn't just go out completely. It just applies to a larger company and a larger skill base and manpower. And you can then use this innovation to impact a larger database and generate more profit. If you have the money to be able to conduct customer service surveys or do researches that have this innovation, they can help you improve your products, improve your innovations. Plus, it's not like organic growth completely stifles out the name of the mergers and acquisitions that they get. For example, Facebook through organic growth gaining WhatsApp for the acquisition of Kareem by Uber Eats. They give us an example of a company called Banana. The proposition can't just come up here. Firstly, debating by example, because if Banana was such this tiny baby company, they wouldn't have had the resources to create such an innovative product that can be taken by Apple. Therefore, their example is first really unlikely, and it's ridiculous that they're trying to use an example as mechanism for their point. Now, moreover, on why exactly their point on monopoly and corruption, they tell us that corruption is more likely to happen. Once again, they give us the example of Shell in Nigeria, but that's not our burden to prove in today's debate. Our burden to prove is that small companies, when they go through organic growth, they're more likely to have more success, more profit, to have a better economy, and when you have that, you're able to benefit the economy of the country as a whole. Therefore, when they talk about corruption and monopoly, first, that exists already on their side of the house when you actually incentivize organic growth, as we can see from their literal example of Shell in Nigeria. There are regulations the government has and they place on companies to avoid monopolies in the long term. That's a completely separate debate on how you limit corruption, etc. And it falls outside the scope of this debate. It's not our burden to prove to you why exactly these bigger monopolies aren't really that likely to succeed. Okay, now onto my extension on how exactly you make these companies more appealing to foreign larger companies. You're more visible to them on a business monopoly because you now have a better reputation and a bigger monopoly that many foreign investors find attractive and see as beneficial. The way that innovation works in itself is that a bigger company or an investor sees you as something that you can benefit them. You cannot benefit them when you are a baby company with maybe innovative products that aren't actually being seen, that don't have a reputation and aren't even seen as credible. When you have big foreign investments coming at you, this is beneficial for all types of companies, and inorganic growth in itself is extremely beneficial. I'll take you afterwards. So why exactly is this beneficial? For slower burning industries, for example, media companies, etc., it's better for them because you are able to get a massive boost through organic growth that you would probably have to take a decade maybe to get through organic growth. This is exactly why you need inorganic growth for developing countries, because developing countries don't have 10 years to waste while they wait for their company to build up through organic growth. These 10 years, during that time, the economy falls worse and worse, the situation gets worse and worse. You need inorganic growth in developing countries, and that's the nuance of this debate that the proposition just doesn't get. Yes, I'll take your POI.
Okay, so first of all, don't you think these corporations are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable in today's debate? And don't you think the government is actually going to help these corporations to have organic growth? They're not going to be oh, you're going to go and organic growth on your own.
Okay, your POI was first a bit too long, but I'll respond to it later. But for now, just why exactly does the government have an incentive then to build these companies when they don't even recognize them? There are probably so many smaller companies in developing countries. There's a limited amount of money that the government has. There's a limited amount of like people, because these smaller companies don't even have a market presence. There's no way for the government to notice them. And even if they did notice them, where's the incentive then to help them grow? Because the government sees that if they do put money into helping them have organic growth, where there's no guarantee that they're going to succeed. So for the government, it's just a complete waste of money. There's no incentive, even if they were able to see these companies in the market presence. So why exactly then is it beneficial for technology companies or like fast growing industries? But for technology companies, it's because there's a lot of information. When you are able to share like skill from these skilled workers from larger companies with more experience, these smaller countries, you have a larger, like more examples. Secondly, please read the motion like on-site proposition. The motion states that you're supposed to incentivize, not help. So therefore, the government or any other thing that they think that they can help is not allowed to. Also, it's really funny about like how they talk about like skilled workers and how like that's not going to exist. But when you merge with larger companies or acquisitions, the skill sets that these workers have are able to like bring it and apply it to your own company. But the mechanization for this is that basically, even if these companies don't have skilled workers, you gain these skilled workers from other investments, larger investments, foreign investments happen due to the better attraction and larger market presence you get through organic growth. Therefore, what happens on our side of the house is that there's a positive feedback loop where smaller companies are able to break through bigger barriers, where they're able to succeed, actually gain profit, and you encourage more innovation. People say there's like you get results back from being innovative. Therefore, I've never been prouder to oppose. Thank you.
I would like to thank that speaker for their speech. In order to complete the substantive part of case from side proposition, I'd like to invite the third proposition speaker. Here.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
I prefer chat POIs. And if everyone is ready, wait, let me set up my timer. Okay, my time starts in 3, 2, 1. Judge, I think that the fact that Shell has taken over Nigeria due to inorganic growth and the exploitation of past companies is enough to prove how not incentivizing companies to engage in organic growth is going to be very disastrous, especially when you're taking a developing country and essentially allowing this to happen and incentivizing companies to do the wrong thing using inorganic growth. So 3 clarifications that I'd like to make. I think the opposition should take this into account. First, governments have an incentive to build the companies. Note that their assertion that companies aren't known by governments are contradictory, since if you are wanting to engage companies and incentivize them to have inorganic growth, it's likely that you will want and will help these companies in general. This is the same for their side. We don't see why this analysis doesn't apply to them either way. Second, their entire point on FDI is essentially their entire argument, since if they say that companies and people are incapable of making good products on their own, since they can't do anything when they're small, note that this is saying it for verbatim, since this is their refutation to our argument. Note that then their entire point is only on FDI, since they're over reliant on other people and companies overseas helping them. This means that then I think that this is able to make us win, since if you are overly reliant on other companies, this means that you are being exploited by the West. This means that you are being exploited by other companies which are going to be far better than you. I think that they agree that this is inorganic growth and this is going to be good. Then this means that this company is going to be useless, since they can't do anything on their own. They are reliant on other companies. Then the third point on how they say that governments cannot help, they're only going to be incentivizing. 2 things here. First, incentivizing is going to be like generally incentivizing, sure, and incentivizing is not helping, but know that the entire case still applies, since incentivizing companies are likely to work. Our entire point and framing was based on how we prove how first incentivizing companies are going to help these people, and second, how this is actually going to work. Then moving on to a question before I'll analyze the 2 main clashes of this debate. First, on whether corruption exists on either world and whether it is in the scope of today's debate. First, the fact that big companies can get bought out means that the country is likely to be reliant on them. This creates over-reliance, which means that it's likely that they will be corrupt in order to maximize their benefits, since they are already wealth-oriented and they are in control of the company. They agree that for direct FDI exists on their side as well. Therefore, how is this not going to create corruption when they already say that when they say that they rely on FDI and FDI is going to be mutually beneficial to their side? Second, why is corruption greatly mitigated on our side then, because this incentive gets companies to not buy their companies out in order to like become the sole benefactor of this wealth. Therefore, this is likely to promote long-term growth over simply just buying each other out, which is what we support in organic growth over inorganic growth. Then what I think this means is that corruption is in the scope of this debate because they directly say that there's FDI, but then they see that there's no like how corruption is not in the scope of this debate. I think that this directly means that they concede and like they essentially contradict because they say that like corruption is not in the scope of this debate, but we essentially want FDI, right? And FDI helps us. This means that because the developing countries and overlines causes corruption, I think that we're able to take this point on how corruption exists, like on how corruption exists in developing world, how we are able to solve it. Then just a quick point on how FDI is bad. Note that this creates over-reliance and this is essentially causing corruption. Therefore, I think that we are able to take their extension and essentially their entire case line that they are dependent on FDI on. Then moving on to the two main clashes, first on innovation. So which side will get more innovation? Then I think that on government, we tell you that the people that innovate will get less credit, so there's less incentive to innovate, right? If a company in China creates really exceptional quality phones, but they're small and they're lesser known because bigger companies like Huawei know that this is exactly how like economics works and how like inorganic growth works. You have a bigger company, and even if you do have a smaller company that is able to make really, really good products, because they are never going to get out there, this means that they're going to be rendered useless. And if Huawei is going to seek them out, since note that big companies usually have an incentive to find smaller companies to buy them out, to get better, like to get better things, and then appeal to the public because they are such big of a company, they're able to make much more money with that. I think that this is how this actually works instead of what they actually say. Then I think that this means that this mechanization and analysis is likely to apply to developing countries as well. Therefore, a world where we have incentivized companies to engage in organic growth is going to be able to get rid of all these problems, since I think that this means that we are able to build it up from the ground. Opposition says that just because a company exists does not mean that they're innovative. 3 points here. First, well, the companies that survive do. I think that this means that because like companies have to exist in the first place to have this debate to exist in the first place, means that these businesses are made to grow and to become good companies means that they're likely to be good, right? Second, their points on how countries cannot survive on our side was also very assertive, since this was a one-liner on how countries cannot survive on our side. Therefore, we take their point. Somehow, I don't believe that. I think that like even if we do take to some extent that this was not an assertion, I think that first countries these companies can survive on our side due to the fact that we are allowing these people to build it up from the ground. I think that the fact that there is going to be supply and demand, and the fact that there is going to be some amount of like competition, means that these people and these companies are likely to want to get innovation, to want to make good products, since they are in a developing country. This means that they have raw materials, right? Therefore, it's likely that they already have the materials already good for them. This means that they are likely to already survive. This means that this means that opposition's point does not stand. Third, they say that the innovation applies to a larger company, but note that innovators want credit and cash. If you are bought out and you do not get any credit, which is likely what the case is, since bigger companies are likely to want to use their entire appeal, this means that opposition's point does not stand, since these innovators do not have any incentive, since they do not get any credit. Opposition says that if you are a small company, you're not capable of making good things. But first, note how like if you incentivize these people to do good things, like I think that this means that these small companies are actually capable of making good things. But second, already re-clarified how the economy works and how bigger companies have good appeals, even if these small companies are able to make good products. Therefore, I think that they need to re-clarify this in WIP, but it's already too late for them to do so, right? Then the summary for this is that I think that bigger companies buying out smaller companies means that this innovation is mitigated. Therefore, it's better on our side by a long shot, where this does not happen as much. Second clash on development, which side will get more development. So proposition, they say that we will get more jobs, more long-term growth, less corruption. Why is this true then? First, on the point of jobs, more good companies, they will become more and more skilled as they diversify. But second, because competition means that their people are able to long-term growth, since healthy competition means that they're able to grow. But third, in developing countries, corruption is so common. So if there's one big corporation or for FDI, it means that it will be easy to have it dominate the entire market, right? Then opposition says that people get development since overseas people invest in their side, and this is going to be way better on their side. But note that this directly creates some sense of from the get-go, creates some sort of corruption. Therefore, I think that a world where even they agree that developing countries are very fragile, a world where they rely on other countries, and a world where they do not build it from the ground up, means that they're having corruption on top of a very volatile system, essentially how Shell works in Nigeria. Therefore, I think the summary for this is that our side gets more long-term benefits to development. Therefore, for all these clashes and reasons above, I think that this should be a long-shot victory to proposition.
All right, I'd like to thank that speaker for their speech. In order to complete the substantive part of case from side opposition, I'd like to invite the opposition, third opposition speaker here.
Am I visible and audible?
Yes, you are, but your voice is quite soft. If you could move closer to the microphone, that would be good.
Okay, let me get my time. Okay, so I prefer POIs verbally, and my pronouns are she, her. So yeah. Okay, so my speech will begin now. So today my speech, I'll be going over two main clashes. Firstly, will there be a loss of innovation on either side? And secondly, on which side are we able to actually allow these companies to grow their business and help the economy of these developing countries? So under the first clash, right, what does prop tell us? They tell us that like companies will be bought out even if they're creating really good products, and a lot of their credit will be taken away. Therefore, some people might lose incentive to create products and there will be no innovation. So we tell you that firstly, if these companies were creating such perfect products in the first place, they would be a lot richer and wouldn't really need to be this way, right? They wouldn't take it later. They wouldn't need organic or inorganic growth because they would be pretty successful. Okay, and then talking about their point about how people's credit might be taken away. We think that like when people are part of big companies, it doesn't mean that they will lose any sort of incentive they have to create products, right? Firstly, we think that these original companies will still be credited either way. For example, when Facebook buys WhatsApp, they will keep WhatsApp's name, right? We tell you that these big companies do have an incentive to be crediting the original company, or at least like keeping their name and etc. Because, for example, they can attract the people from the developing country, or like people know these companies already and are likely to purchase or like be attracted to them because they know it's from their country, or like they knew it beforehand or something like that, right? So these big companies aren't going to just be wiping out every single thing that these small companies are like have already, right? Let's say that, okay, secondly, right? Let's say that these people from these companies are as talented as Proposition says, right? I think that these people will still have an incentive to innovate no matter what, right? Like they will still have an incentive to innovate, especially because that their company is a lot more successful and they have a lot more reach and customer, and they have a lot more potential, right? And so therefore a lot of people are still going to be like motivated by things like profit, right? Prop can't just say that like if they're so talented they could just do organic growth by themselves and help the country without these mergers and acquisition, right? We tell you that this simply doesn't work because these companies, like we explained to you over and over again, that these companies don't have enough resources, and only when they have enough capital and money for them to actually innovate are they really able to make these products and reach a really wide universal audience, right? They likely don't have that many skilled workers. Only like obviously there's going to be some people who are like good at innovation, but we have a lot more knowledge and skilled workers on our side. It's more likely that we tell you that when people experience inorganic growth, they're able to get a lot more resources and more customers, and their products will be able to reach a much larger audience, and thus they're able to get a lot more profit on our side as well. So under the first clash, we tell you that we take this clash because people are going to still be motivated to innovate because they know that they have more resources to do so and explore like the products they can create, and therefore when they are successful, they can like reach a larger audience and actually get more profit. And I'll take your POI.
Okay, so bigger companies overshadow these people. I think that I already alluded to this in my speech. Therefore, they're likely to use their appeal to get more money. I think that at the end of the day, these innovators get less credit.
Okay, so I think that like when these innovators are in big, like there's a lot of innovators who are in big companies, but they're still getting credit. But we tell you that on your side, they can't get any credit as at all because they don't have resources to actually make their product, or if they were so smart or like good that they could already make these perfect products, the debate wouldn't exist because they wouldn't need to like have inorganic or organic growth. So moving on to my second clash, on which side are these companies actually able to grow their market and help the economy? So prop tells us a few things, right? Firstly, organic growth means more competition, which is good for the economy. We tell you that this is not really true on their side, and it's better on our side because, for example, like inorganic growth is really the thing that can bring more competition to these companies because they're able to give them this competitive edge and a lot more power and resources, right? They then tell us one of their main points is how there's going to be more corruption on our side. We tell you that firstly, corruption exists on prop to, right? Once their big companies like banana or something becomes bigger through economic growth, there will be corruption if the companies become so large. Moreover, we think that it's a lot more likely that the government, like the real government, is going to be corrupt, right, in these developing countries. If these governments are literally corrupt, they aren't even going to be able to help these like companies in the first place, or like incentivize them, or like give them any monetary benefits. At least on our side, we tell you that these bigger companies who are going to buy the smaller companies are well known throughout the world and care more about things like PR and need to at least have some sort of transparency. For example, things like companies like Apple and Google, right? It's better than having a corrupt government like that obviously can't help these smaller companies. Lastly, they tell us that the government can help these smaller companies and have an incentive, right? We tell you that like, yes, we agree, it's true. If the government did want to help, they could help if they had money, or like if they were corrupt in the first place, they wouldn't be helping them anyways, right? Lastly, what do we tell you under this class, right? We tell you that we are able to actually help these companies grow because we provide these companies with immediate and secure benefits, right? There's less risk on our side because there's a definite guarantee of profit. And we already explained to you why corruption is a lot less likely to exist on our side compared to their side, right? Because we tell you that it's like a transaction where you can ensure more manpower, right? On the other hand, when you incentivize like organic growth, there's no guarantee that there's going to be profits and you don't have any resources anyways. You're completely relying on the way in which your customers react to your product, and this is unreliable, especially when you have a much smaller customer base. So even in our worst case scenario, we tell you that if everything proposition accuses us is true, we're still able to ensure better profits and better credibility for these smaller companies, right? Because we know that these bigger companies will obviously still help them, and at least they are transparent and better than a corrupt government, which can't really like give any resources whatsoever, right? We think that when we have these bigger companies, they're able to actually give more credibility and improve the economic status of these developing countries overall, because there is this ensured and certain economic growth. The goal that we tell you that we are able to better achieve the goal of today's debate, which is to actually help these developing countries, right? We think that proposition hasn't really been able to mention why exactly their case is able to create a more stable financial scene for these developing countries, which is why we win this class so easily, because they fail to explain to us why organic growth is so possible with any sort of clear mechanism, right? We tell you that on our side, at the end of the day, there's a lot more foreign investment and bigger companies giving them the secure monetary benefits, and overall we're able to help these developing countries a lot more and help them pull them out of these bad financial situations, and I'm so proud to oppose.
All right, I'd like to thank that speaker for their speech. In order to summarize the case for side opposition, I'd like to invite the opposition reply speaker. Here.
Hi, sorry, I need to charge my computer real quick. I'll be ready in like 30 seconds. I need to set up my time. Okay. I'll be ready. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. So I think it's so funny that the entire proposition's case has simply been hollering the word corruption over and over again without any actual proper mechanisms for any of their arguments to even stand. So I would like to first start my speech by serving a reminder for everybody that we're talking about developing countries here. They're different from developed countries because in developing countries, workers lack skills that are necessary in modern day jobs. For example, technological skills, simply because, they're lacking behind in these types of areas. And obviously that's what's happening in the status quo. And technology is part of the modern market, and it's extremely necessary. And it's more likely that when the locals have these skills in this area of technology or more modern day skills, then this would help the developing countries more, because that would obviously attract more foreign investment and they can keep up with the international market, as we've explained, right? And as I've already explained, even technological transfer happens with inorganic growth when they have the collective resources and assets to both gain these types of this type of technology, and also for the local workers to be trained and build these types of skills. And this doesn't happen with organic growth because they don't have these collective resources and assets. And like, where does the technological transfer come from? Like, technological transfer comes when foreign, a lot of the stuff that happens is when foreign investment comes, and this foreign investment, it gives these companies the resources that are necessary. However, this doesn't happen with organic growth because the companies aren't big enough and don't have a big enough reputation and don't have a big enough market share. They're just these tiny, like a lot of these tiny spotted companies that like may be good, but they don't have enough like workers, first of all, as well as resources to fully carry out their plans and the products that they want to create. Now, secondly, what the third speaker of proposition has been saying, it's like, oh, we hate FDI, we hate foreign investment. However, their only explanation for this is corruption. But why? Foreign investment, FDI, is foreign companies, just people over, like companies or people overseas investing their money and resources into these local companies. How in any way does that lead to corruption? They fail to explain this, and it's also a very weak attempt to try and explain why our case doesn't stand, and it doesn't even work. However, as we've explained, FDI is good because it increases employment opportunities and gives these companies more resources. And I would like to fully summarize this case by talking about three main things. Firstly, innovation. So a proposition suddenly brings us up in their third speech about how the government incentivizes smaller companies with growth. But hello, like, where's the actual mechanism for this? Nowhere. They tell us that governments have an incentive to smaller companies or help smaller companies, but they lack the nuance and framing of these points. Note that this is newer material and should not be credited at all. And they talk about one-liners, but this is the backbone of their case, and it's teetering on the brink of not even standing. And also, innovation can still exist within big companies. Why? It's because innovation equals new ideas, right? And new ideas means that these ideas don't yet exist in the market. The product doesn't yet exist in the market. So obviously, innovation equals an opportunity for more profit, and obviously companies, they want more profit. So therefore, innovation equals more profit, and therefore it's still encouraged on our side, even when the big companies merge. And next up, they talk about credit. But okay, where's the impact? And the worst case that this is true, at least there is this technological transfer and jobs for locals. That's still better. And now finally, they talk about corruption. And however, we don't understand how corruption doesn't exist on their side anyways. And thirdly, they talk about monopoly. However, monopoly, if the government is the one, as Prop has very vaguely explained, incentivizing the organic growth, monopoly is more likely to occur. Because why? The government is the one with the capacity to make certain companies the only sellers of a certain product. And since they're the ones backing the organic growth of the company, they're more likely to have the links and connections in order to do this and create the monopoly on proposition side. So therefore, all of their arguments that they have brought up to us have completely been rebutted, and therefore opposition very, very clearly wins today's debate. Thank you.
I would like to thank that speaker for the speech. In order to summarize the case for side proposition, I'd like to invite the proposition reply speaker here.
Hello, can I come? Am I clearly audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Hello?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. So, okay, without further ado, my time will start in 3, 2, 1. If you have a developing world that is over reliant on one big massive corporation, that's a recipe for disaster, right? Which is essentially the entire opposition case, right? Therefore, there's going to be more risk, right? Since all the eggs are in one basket. But moreover, note that the FDI is going to be cause even more reliance, right? So who helps, right? Who helps these people more, right? I think that it is the us, right? Because since we are able to have these companies built up from the ground, which you also said in the POI, right? We told you that these companies are able to like get financial support for the government, right? It's not going to be just themselves and all of their like profits, and it's not going to be just themselves, right? Another thing that opposition just comes up and says is that, oh, there's going to be like WhatsApp, right? And how there's going to be that kind of stuff, right? But we tell you, right, as a whole, right? We tell you that WhatsApp already had like around 500 million users already, right? When it was acquired by Facebook, right? It's not like a small company, right? It's a very, very massive big company when it was acquired by Facebook, right? We tell you this is why they're like entire example about how like, oh, WhatsApp is like example of like WhatsApp just like completely just false, right? Okay. Compared to opposition, right? So who helps these people more, right? We think it's on side of government, right? Because we tell you we're able to build these companies from the ground, right? Where compared to opposition, where there's over reliance on one big massive company which is essentially their entire world, right? And we give a POI at how these people overall just get less credit, right? These innovators get less credit, right? So as a response to the POI, right? They say that if these people had better products, then this debate wouldn't exist. Okay. Now onto the questions, right? So first of all, whether corruption exists in either world, right? First of all, the fact that big companies can be bought out, that means the country is likely to be reliant on them, right? This means that the over reliance, which means that it's likely for them to be corrupt in order to maximize their benefits, since they're like likely like wealth oriented, right? So why is corruption greatly mitigated on our side, right? Because we tell you that incentive gets companies to not buy their companies out of order to be able to be the sole benefactor of this wealth, right? Therefore, this is likely to promote long-term growth over simply buying each other out, right? So why is corruption in the scope of this debate, right? Because we tell you that developing countries and over alliances cause corruption, right? Opposition keeps saying how these people are going to be like, oh, they're already like being very famous and if they have like a good product, right? But the thing is, the reality is that bigger companies overshadow them, right? They're probably not going to go like, oh, if Banana creates like a really good phone, right? Apple's probably not going to go like, oh, Banana created this phone and we just acquired them, and then what we have is like a better like phone as a whole, right? They're probably not going to be that, right? Because Apple knows that they have like a good reputation, which means that they're probably not going to go like, oh, Banana created this really good phone, right? They're not going to say that. They're probably going to say that we created this phone. It was very innovative, and now we have a really good company as a whole, right? We tell you that these companies are just going to overshadow these smaller companies, which is why these smaller companies with good innovators just fizzle and just die out as a whole, right? I think that this means that we're able to prove again and again, right, how we win the innovation point, right, and prove how reliance exists uniquely on their side, right? But furthermore, we tell you that on our side of the house, we are able to help the developing country rise out of the poverty pit, right? Because we tell you that inorganic growth, right, is these big corporations are going to buy out all of these other companies, and the developing countries are going to be reliant on one big massive corporation, which leads to a bunch of corruption, right? So what happens on our side of the house, right? We have a world where these developing countries are able to take a turn for the best, right? A turn for the best where these big corporations are not able to buy all of these other small companies that cause corruption. The government is probably going to give all of these like smaller corporations, that's probably going to be like a lot of like money, well, not maybe a lot of money, but like some money to help them innovate and like grow as a whole, right? A world where, and proposition has a world where these people are able to lift the developing countries out of the poverty pit, right? So what does opposition have? Opposition has a world where these developing countries are always going to be controlled by big, massive corporations, like the example of Nigeria and Shell, right? Which buys out everything in a country, leading them to be forever be controlled by one massive corporation and just be controlled by control an entire country as a whole, right? So this is why we're proud to be on side proposition. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank that speaker for their speech, and I'd like to thank all of you for this debate.